Jacob Turner had lived in the quiet corners of southern Arizona for years, and most days of his life passed in almost the same way. He woke up before the sun, fed his horses, checked the ranch fences, and then returned home to cook a simple meal for himself. His life was peaceful, almost too peaceful, and sometimes he wondered if anything unexpected would ever happen to him again. But he liked the silence. He liked the open sky. He liked knowing that the desert, for all its emptiness, always held small secrets that only patient eyes could see. On one warm evening, when the sky was slowly turning gold and the desert wind was brushing the dry grass, Jacob rode out to check the far fence near the old mesquite trees. The air was quiet except for the soft steps of his horse and the buzzing of small insects. He felt calm and unhurried, the way he often did at the end of the day. He had checked that fence so many times, he almost knew every post and wire by memory. But as he approached the tall mesquite near the small wash, something unusual caught his eye, something that didn't belong there. He slowed his horse and leaned forward slightly, narrowing his eyes. There, sitting on the ground with her back resting gently against the trunk of the tree, was a young Apache woman. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her long skirt was spread out around her. At first glance, Jacob thought she was simply resting. But then he noticed the way she held her ankle with both hands. She looked tired, maybe even in a little discomfort. Jacob was not the kind of man who rode past someone in need. He felt a small wave of concern rise in his chest. He guided his horse closer, carefully, not wanting to startle her. As he approached, she looked up at him with calm but unreadable eyes. There was no fear on her face, only a quiet stillness, as if she had been waiting. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Jacob asked gently, trying to keep his voice as soft as possible. The desert could feel lonely, and he didn't want her to think he meant any harm. She didn't answer. Instead, she gave a small shake of her head and looked down at her ankle. Jacob noticed she was breathing slowly, almost too calmly for someone who might be hurt. But he didn't question it. He climbed down from his horse and stepped closer. "Did you twist it?" he asked again, pointing to her ankle. She didn't speak, but she gave the smallest nod. Jacob didn't understand why she wasn't talking, but he respected her silence. Maybe she was shy. Maybe she spoke a different language. Maybe she was simply tired. There were many reasons someone might choose not to speak right away. He didn't want to pressure her. He knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance, and looked at her ankle. It wasn't swollen, and it didn't seem bruised. But he didn't dare question her. If she said she was hurt, whether with words or with gestures, that was enough for him. "Can you stand?" he asked softly. She tried to rise but seemed to lose balance, reaching out and placing her hand lightly against his arm. It wasn't a strong grip, more like a soft request for help. Jacob felt a quiet sense of responsibility settle in his chest. He couldn't leave her there, not with the evening coming and the desert cooling down. "Well," he said in a gentle voice, "I can take you to my ranch. It's not far. You can rest there and get some food and water. Tomorrow I can see if your family is nearby." She looked straight into his eyes, as if studying him, and then nodded again. It was a slow, deliberate nod, one that made Jacob feel she understood what he was saying and accepted his offer. With careful movements, he helped her onto his horse. She sat behind him, holding onto the saddle horn lightly. Jacob made sure she was comfortable before guiding the horse toward home. As they rode, he could feel the quiet presence of the woman behind him. She did not speak, nor did she seem frightened. She simply sat still, watching the horizon as the sky shifted from gold to soft purple. The ride wasn't long, but Jacob felt each moment stretch, as if his mind was trying to understand the strange calmness of the woman he had just met. He had helped strangers before, lost tourists, hikers who had misjudged the heat, even a kid from town who had gotten stuck after his bike chain broke, but none had been this silent or this peaceful while accepting help. Something about her was different, though he could not say what. When they reached his ranch, a modest place built with simple wood and surrounded by open land, Jacob carefully helped her down from the horse. She kept her gaze curious but steady, taking in her surroundings. He opened the door for her, and she stepped inside without hesitation. The house was small but warm. A stone fireplace sat in the corner, a rocking chair near it, and a long table rested against the wall. Everything was neat, mostly because Jacob lived alone and didn't own much. He always believed in keeping life simple. "Please, sit," he said, guiding her to the chair near the hearth. She sat gracefully, folding her hands in her lap, still watching everything quietly. Jacob brought her a glass of cool water. She accepted it with both hands, almost in a respectful way, and drank slowly. When he offered her a small plate of food, some bread and fruit, she nodded in thanks. "Do you need anything else?" he asked, hoping she might answer this time. But she stayed silent, her expression unreadable yet gentle. She didn't look scared or confused. In fact, she looked completely comfortable being in his home, almost as if she had expected to be there. Jacob found that strange, but he reminded himself that people sometimes reacted differently when they were tired or injured. As the evening deepened, the warm fire made the room glow softly. Jacob sat at the table, giving her space. He didn't want to overwhelm her with questions. She seemed peaceful, almost serene, watching the flames in quiet thought. After a while, her eyes grew heavy, and she curled up gently near the hearth, using a folded blanket as a pillow. Jacob draped another blanket over her to keep her warm. He made sure to keep a respectful distance, choosing to sit by the table and gently polish his saddle gear, just to keep himself awake and alert in case she needed anything. Throughout the night, he found himself glancing over at her, wondering who she was, where she came from, and why she had been sitting alone by the mesquite tree. But each time, he reminded himself that tomorrow would give him answers. For now, she needed rest, and he was content knowing he had helped someone in need. Yet, deep inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something he didn't understand yet. He had picked up a stranger. Yes, but something about the entire situation felt like a quiet mystery waiting to unfold. It was as if the desert, with all its hidden stories and ancient ways, had placed her on his path for a reason he could not yet see. Jacob finally blew out the lantern, leaving only the soft firelight in the room. He sat back in his chair, listening to the gentle breathing of the woman sleeping beside the hearth. The night was calm, peaceful, and strangely filled with a quiet anticipation, as though something important had begun the moment he lifted her from the desert ground. And Jacob Turner, who lived a life of quiet routines, had no idea that this simple act of kindness was about to lead him into a tradition older than he could imagine, one that would change the path of his life in ways he had never expected. The morning sun rose gently over the desert, spreading soft golden light across Jacob Turner's quiet ranch. The air was still cool, and the birds had just begun their morning songs. Jacob woke earlier than usual, partly out of habit, and partly because he remembered the young Apache woman sleeping near his fireplace. For a moment, he wondered if he had imagined the entire scene from the night before, but when he walked softly into the main room, he saw her still lying on the blanket, peaceful and calm. She slept so quietly that he almost didn't want to disturb her. Her breathing was slow and steady, and the warm glow of the fireplace had kept the room comfortable through the night. Jacob stood there for a moment, observing her, trying to understand the situation. She didn't look troubled. She didn't look lost. She didn't even look uncomfortable in a stranger's home. She looked as if she belonged exactly where she was. This puzzled Jacob. Usually, when strangers came to his ranch for help, especially unexpectedly, they showed signs of worry or discomfort. But this woman, she seemed almost too calm, too peaceful, almost like she knew something he didn't. Jacob shook off the thought and moved to the kitchen area. He quietly began preparing breakfast, simple things like eggs, toast, and a pot of warm tea. The sound of clinking dishes and the soft crackle of the fire slowly filled the room. As he set the table, he noticed movement from the corner of his eye. The woman was awake. She sat up gently, brushing her hair to one side. She didn't seem startled or confused by her surroundings. Instead, she looked around the room with a soft, observing expression, as if she was studying every detail with quiet interest. When her eyes met Jacob's, she gave a small nod, almost like a polite greeting. "Good morning," Jacob said warmly. "I made some breakfast. You're welcome to eat." She didn't speak, but she stood up gracefully and made her way to the table. Her steps were steady, and Jacob noticed something odd. Her ankle didn't seem to bother her at all. She walked without limping, without holding on to anything for support, as if it had never been hurt. He paused, confused for a moment. Yesterday she had acted like she couldn't stand. She had held her ankle tightly. She had leaned on him for support. But now, nothing seemed wrong. Jacob didn't want to assume anything, but the thought lingered. Still, he didn't question her. Maybe she had simply rested and felt better. Maybe the injury had been light. People sometimes exaggerated pain when they were tired or frightened. He brushed the thought aside and poured her a cup of tea. She accepted it with both hands again, a gesture that seemed respectful, almost ceremonial. Jacob sat across from her, trying to think of a gentle way to begin a conversation. "Do you live nearby?" he asked softly. She looked at him, her expression unreadable, and then she shifted her gaze to the window. It wasn't a refusal. It wasn't agreement. It was simply silence, thoughtful silence, as if she was deciding whether she should answer at all. Jacob didn't push further. "I can help you get back home today," he added kindly. "If your family is close, I can take you to them." Still, no response. The silence didn't feel uncomfortable, but it did feel unusual. Most people would have at least nodded or shaken their head. But she stayed calm, composed, and quietly observant. As she ate, Jacob noticed her taking small, delicate bites, as if she was used to careful manners. Her posture remained straight, and her eyes occasionally wandered around the room, studying everything: the shelves, the old photographs, the pottery, the woven blanket on the rocking chair. It was as if she was cataloging the details of his home in her mind. Jacob tried to explain the situation a little more. "I didn't want to leave you alone out there," he said. "The desert can get cold at night. I wasn't sure if anyone was coming for you." The woman looked at him again, this time with a softer expression, almost like appreciation. She nodded gently. That single gesture told him she understood, and was thankful, even if she wouldn't speak. After breakfast, she stood up and walked toward the door. Jacob wondered if she wanted to go outside. "You want some fresh air?" he asked. She nodded. Jacob opened the door for her. The morning light made the sand shimmer, and a light breeze brushed across the ranch yard. She stepped outside and slowly walked toward the large corral, looking at the horses with a peaceful interest. She reached out her hand, and one of the horses, a calm brown mare, stepped forward and nuzzled her palm. The woman smiled softly, the first true emotion Jacob had seen from her. "You like horses?" he asked. She didn't answer with words, but she moved her hand gently over the mare's head, showing clear familiarity and affection. Jacob felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. Despite the unusual silence, the woman's presence didn't feel troubling. Instead, it felt almost meaningful, though he couldn't explain why. But the same small thought returned. Why had she been alone under that tree? Why hadn't she spoken a single word? And why had she seemed injured one moment and perfectly fine the next? As they stood outside, Jacob noticed something else, a sense of anticipation in the air, as if the world was holding still for a moment. The woman looked toward the distant hills, her expression patient, almost expectant, like she was waiting for something or someone. Jacob decided he needed answers, but he wanted to be careful. "Is someone coming for you?" he asked quietly. The woman turned to him, her eyes calm, and she gave a slow, steady nod. This surprised him. If she knew someone was coming, why had she allowed him to bring her home? Why not wait by the tree? Why act hurt? None of it made sense to him. He tried again. "Will they come today?" This time, she didn't nod. She didn't shake her head either. Instead, she simply looked at him, holding his gaze with a calm intensity. as if she was trying to tell him something without speaking. Jacob felt puzzled again. There was a meaning behind her silence, a purpose behind her actions. But he had no idea what that purpose might be. Hours passed quietly. The woman stayed near the corral, comfortably sitting in the shade, watching the ranch animals with interest. She didn't show any signs of fear or impatience. She appeared completely at ease, as if she were in a place she understood. Jacob did small chores around the ranch but kept glancing at her, wondering when her family would arrive or if they even knew she was here. He couldn't shake the odd sense that something larger was happening, something he wasn't aware of yet. As the day went on, the air grew warm, and the peaceful silence of the ranch made Jacob think more deeply. Every once in a while, the woman would look toward the hills again, like she was watching for something only she could sense. The day continued this way, calm, quiet, and filled with unspoken questions. Then, just before evening, Jacob noticed something in the distance. A group of riders approaching. They moved slowly but with certainty, heading straight toward his ranch. The woman stood up quietly, as if she had expected them all along. Jacob felt his heart tighten slightly, not in fear, but in curiosity and confusion. Who were they? Why had she waited here? And what exactly was going on? He watched as the group drew nearer, and the woman remained still, waiting for them with calm anticipation. Jacob didn't know it yet, but the simple act of helping her would soon reveal a truth he never imagined, a truth about traditions older than his memories, and a meaning behind her silence that would reshape everything he thought he understood. The sun was beginning to soften as it moved toward the late afternoon sky, spreading gentle orange light across Jacob's ranch. The young Apache woman stood quietly near the corral, her calm eyes watching the approaching riders. Jacob felt a strange twist in his stomach, not because he feared anything, but because he sensed that something important was about to happen, something he didn't understand yet. As the riders came closer, Jacob could see that they were not in a hurry. Their horses moved in a steady, graceful rhythm, as if the group had traveled this land many times and knew every path by heart. The woman beside him didn't move, didn't step back, didn't show any sign of worry. Instead, she stood with a soft dignity, her hands folded gently in front of her. It almost looked like she had been waiting for this moment. Jacob walked a few steps forward, wanting to greet the riders politely. He shaded his eyes with one hand and watched them slow down near his fence. There were 4 of them, 2 older men, 1 middle-aged woman, and 1 man who looked not much older than the young woman he had helped. Their clothes were simple but traditional, carrying patterns that held meaning Jacob didn't know. He cleared his throat softly and offered a welcoming nod as the group stopped a few yards away. "Good evening," Jacob said, trying to sound friendly and respectful. "If you're looking for someone, she's right here. I found her near the mesquite tree yesterday." The oldest man among the riders stepped forward. His hair was long and silver, tied loosely behind his back. His eyes were steady, filled with wisdom and calm understanding. When he looked at Jacob, he didn't show surprise or suspicion. Instead, he offered a warm but serious nod, as if he had expected this meeting. "We know," the elder said softly. Jacob blinked. He hadn't expected such a simple answer. The elder climbed off his horse with slow, careful movements, showing both age and grace. The others remained mounted for a moment, watching the scene with respectful attention. The young woman stepped forward slightly, lowering her gaze in a gesture of respect toward the elder. "You brought her home," the old man said, his voice carrying the depth of years and stories. Yes," Jacob replied, unsure what else to say. "She seemed hurt, and it was getting late. I didn't want to leave her alone out there." The elder nodded again. There was no judgment, no tension, just quiet acceptance. "Thank you," the man said, his voice gentle but meaningful. "You showed kindness, and you honored something without knowing its weight." Jacob felt a wave of confusion wash over him. "Honored? What exactly?" Before the elder answered, he turned to the young woman. She lifted her head and met his eyes. There was something exchanged silently between them. Something Jacob couldn't understand. The moment lasted only a second, but it carried a sense of importance. The elder then turned back to Jacob. "The way you helped her," he said slowly. and the way you brought her into your home. It was not a small gesture. Jacob shifted, feeling even more puzzled. I only did what anyone would do. The elder gave a soft, knowing smile. Not everyone would do what you did. And not everyone would do it in the way you did. The younger man in the group dismounted next. He offered Jacob a faint smile. Not unfriendly, but thoughtful. As if he was measuring Jacob's character. The middle-aged woman and the last rider stayed on their horses, watching respectfully, giving the elder space to speak. The elder stepped closer to Jacob. His presence was calm, grounding, almost comforting. Long ago, he began. Before the world changed, before our ways had to bend to new times, there were traditions the young women followed. Jacob listened carefully, unsure where the story was leading. One such tradition, the elder continued, was a rite that marked the beginning of a union. A woman would show a sign of needing help. A man, if he accepted her presence on his path, would offer that help, and if he took her into his home, he showed he accepted the bond. Jacob felt his heart skip, his eyes slowly widened. Are you saying that what happened yesterday? Yes, the elder said gently. Your actions followed the pattern of an old marriage rite. Jacob felt the world around him pause. He stared at the elder, trying to process the words. Marriage rite? Him? Her? That quiet young woman he had picked up out of pure concern? He shook his head slightly. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean anything like that. I only wanted to help because I thought she was hurt. The elder's expression softened even more. We know you did not know, he said. And we do not expect you to carry a tradition you were not raised with. The young woman stepped forward again, her face calm and open. For the first time since he found her, she spoke. Her voice was soft, clear, and gentle. You acted with a good heart, she said. I accepted your help because I believed you were kind. If you choose not to follow the old rite, I understand. Her voice surprised Jacob not because she spoke English, but because her tone carried both sincerity and grace. She didn't seem upset. She wasn't embarrassed. She was simply honest. I didn't mean to give the wrong message, Jacob said, his own voice slightly nervous now. I didn't know the meaning behind it. The elder nodded. The old ways are remembered, but not required, he said. They guide us, but they do not bind those who are unaware. You have nothing to fear. Jacob exhaled in relief. But confusion still lingered. I have a question, Jacob said carefully. If this was part of a tradition, why did she stay silent? Why didn't she tell me? The elder looked at the young woman, offering her the chance to answer. She stepped forward and held Jacob's gaze with a calm strength. In the tradition, she said gently, silence was part of the sign. A woman did not speak until the man brought her safely to his home. It was a way of showing trust and acceptance. But times have changed. I knew you did not understand the meaning. I did not speak because I wanted to see what kind of person you were. Jacob didn't know what to say. The truth settled in slowly and quietly, like morning light spreading across the land. He realized that the entire journey from the moment he saw her under the mesquite tree to the quiet evening by his fireplace had been part of something older, deeper, and far more meaningful than he ever imagined. The elder stepped closer. You are free to walk your own path, he said. There is no pressure. The important thing is that you showed kindness. Jacob nodded slowly. I appreciate you telling me. I didn't want to disrespect anything. You did not, the elder assured him. The young woman took a small step toward Jacob. She looked peaceful, grateful even. Thank you for your help, she said softly. Whatever your choice is, I will respect it. Jacob felt something shift inside him, not guilt, not confusion, but a deep sense of respect for her family, and for the traditions he had accidentally walked into. He didn't know what he would choose yet, but he knew this. Nothing about the last 24 hours had been random. The riders waited quietly, giving him space to think. but also showing through their calm expressions that they trusted him to respond with honesty. Jacob realized then that this meeting was bigger than a misunderstanding. It was a moment tied to history, culture, and the quiet mystery of the desert itself, a moment he would never forget. The quiet afternoon air settled gently around Jacob's ranch as the truth of the old tradition hung between everyone like a soft, invisible thread. The sun had lowered just enough to cast long shadows across the ground, and a warm golden glow wrapped the entire scene. Jacob stood still, trying to understand everything the Apache elder had explained. His heart wasn't racing, but it felt full of surprise, of questions, and of a strange sense of responsibility he hadn't expected to feel. The young Apache woman stood a short distance from him, her calm eyes watching him with patience. She didn't look upset. She didn't look anxious. If anything, she appeared relieved that the truth had finally been spoken, and that Jacob now understood her silence. Her presence was gentle, almost comforting, even though the situation was unlike anything Jacob had ever experienced. The elder gave Jacob space to think, but he remained close enough to answer any questions. The other riders waited respectfully, their expressions open and understanding. No one seemed in a hurry. No one seemed pressured. The entire moment felt slow and thoughtful, as if the earth itself understood the importance of what Jacob was deciding. Jacob took a deep breath. He felt the weight of their eyes, not in a heavy way, but in a way that made him feel seen, truly seen for the person he was. He cleared his throat softly and spoke with honesty. "I hope you understand," he said, "that I never meant to take part in a marriage tradition. I didn't know what it meant. I just wanted to help someone who looked like she needed help." "We understand," the elder replied kindly. "You acted with a good heart. That is all that matters." Jacob looked at the woman, feeling a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "And you," he said softly to her. "You weren't really hurt." She nodded gently. "Not in the way you believed," she admitted. In the old rite, a woman would show a sign of needing help. It was a symbol, not a real injury. Jacob absorbed her words slowly. "So, when you reached out and took my arm, that was part of it?" She lowered her eyes respectfully. "Yes, and when you stayed silent, that too," she answered. Silence was the way to show trust. The woman waited to see the man's heart before speaking. Jacob wasn't angry with her, not even close. But he felt overwhelmed. He had walked into something meaningful for her people. Something with generations of history behind it. Without knowing its significance, the idea that he had unknowingly played a role in a ritual connected to marriage felt strange and heavy. Seeing the confusion on his face, the elder spoke again. "Young man, you must understand something. These traditions were important long ago. But today, the world is different. Our families no longer hold people to such rites without their full agreement. The meaning remains, but the obligation does not." Jacob nodded slowly. "So I don't have to follow it?" "No," the elder said with certainty. "You have complete freedom. She also has freedom. What matters now is only honesty and respect." The young woman stepped forward, her voice soft. "You can say no," she said. "It will not bring trouble. I will not be disappointed. You showed kindness. That is enough." Her words touched Jacob more than he expected. There was no pressure in her tone, no expectation. She wasn't asking him to continue the tradition. She wasn't asking him to choose her. She was simply offering understanding. Jacob felt a deep need to explain himself. Not because he owed anyone an apology, but because he didn't want to hurt her feelings. "I don't want to disrespect you," he said. "You seem like a kind person, and I'm honored that you trusted me, even for a moment. But I didn't know what this meant. I can't accept something so important without understanding it fully." The elder smiled softly. "That is the wise answer of a thoughtful man." The young woman nodded. There was no disappointment on her face, only peace. "I understand," she told him again. "I came with open hope, not with demands." "You owe me nothing." Jacob felt relief wash over him. But the moment still held a deep meaning. He didn't want to walk away from the conversation without truly acknowledging the importance of what had happened. He wanted her to know that her trust wasn't wasted. "Can I ask something?" Jacob said gently. The elder motioned for him to speak. "Why me?" Jacob asked. "Why choose me for this tradition?" "Even if you didn't expect a yes," the young woman took a moment to answer, choosing her words carefully. "Yesterday morning," she said, "I saw you from a distance while you were riding. I saw the way you treated your horse kindly, patiently. I saw the way you looked at the land with respect, not as something to take from, but as something you live with." Jacob blinked, surprised that she had been watching him even before he saw her. "You did not look like someone who rushed," she continued softly. "You did not look angry or troubled. You looked peaceful. So I thought you were someone who would help without question. Someone safe." Jacob didn't know what to say. Her words felt sincere and gentle, and a warm feeling settled in his chest. He had never thought of himself as someone remarkable, just a simple ranch worker living a quiet life, but hearing her describe him that way touched him deeply. The elder stepped closer. "There was no promise made," he said. "No expectations. The right was offered, but it was also your choice to accept or decline. And this conversation is enough to close it with respect." Jacob gave a small, grateful nod. He felt lighter now, as if a knot inside him had softened. But the moment wasn't finished. There was still something he felt he needed to say. "I don't want this to be the end of understanding," Jacob said softly. "I'd like to learn more about your traditions, your ways, even this rite. I don't want to be ignorant about something that means so much to your family." The elder's eyes warmed with gentle appreciation. "You are welcome to learn," he said. The young woman smiled slightly, a soft expression that suited her calm personality. "If you wish to visit, my family will welcome you." Jacob nodded. "I would like that." There was a quiet pause, a peaceful one. The riders seemed content now, as if everything had unfolded exactly as it needed to. The elder turned toward the woman and gave a small signal. She stepped forward and picked up a small woven pouch she had carried with her. She held it carefully, then handed it to Jacob. "This is a symbol of thanks," she said gently. "Not of the right, only of gratitude." Jacob accepted it with care. The pouch was beautifully made, woven with delicate colors and detailed patterns. It felt meaningful, even without knowing its full history. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I'll treasure it." The elder turned to his companions and nodded. The riders began to mount their horses, preparing to leave. Before the young woman got onto her own horse, she looked at Jacob one last time. "You showed kindness," she said. "I hope your days continue with the same peace you carry in your heart." Jacob felt something warm settle inside him, a gentle, lasting feeling that he knew would stay with him for a long time. As the riders began to move away, the young woman gave one final nod of respect. Jacob watched them ride off, the soft sound of hooves fading into the open desert. The light of the evening sky wrapped the land in calm colors, and Jacob felt a mix of relief, reflection, and quiet gratitude. He stood alone in his yard, holding the woven pouch, thinking about everything that had happened. He hadn't chosen the right, but he had chosen something just as meaningful: respect, honesty, and the beginning of understanding a world older and deeper than his own. And although he didn't know what the future held, he felt certain of one thing. His path had crossed theirs for a reason, and something inside him had quietly changed because of it. The sun had almost disappeared behind the desert hills when Jacob finally stepped away from the spot where the riders had vanished. The soft evening breeze brushed against his face, carrying the gentle smell of dry grass and warm earth. The ranch felt quieter than usual, almost peaceful in a new way, as if the land understood that something meaningful had just happened. Jacob looked down at the small, woven pouch in his hand. Its colors glowed softly in the fading light, each thread telling a story he did not yet know. He walked back toward his cabin slowly, taking his time, letting his thoughts settle. Every step reminded him of how much the day had changed him, not in a dramatic or overwhelming way, but in a quiet, thoughtful one. He felt different, more aware of the world around him, and more connected to the people who had visited. Inside the house, the gentle warmth from the fireplace still lingered. The blanket the young woman had slept on remained folded near the hearth. Jacob paused and looked at it, remembering how calm she had looked as she slept, and how peaceful she had been the entire time she stayed there. He began folding the blanket more neatly, as if he was wrapping up the last piece of the day's events. He placed the woven pouch on the table, then sat down beside it. His fingers brushed over the threads again. He wondered if the colors had meanings. Maybe they told the story of her family or her tribe. Maybe they represented the old rites he had learned about today. Or maybe they were simply chosen because they were beautiful. Whatever the meaning was, Jacob felt honored to have it. As he sat quietly, he realized he didn't feel embarrassed or uncomfortable about what had happened. Instead, he felt grateful that he had helped someone, grateful that the family had trusted him enough to share their tradition, and grateful that he had gained a deeper understanding of a culture he knew only from a distance. The next day dawned with a soft glow, and Jacob woke early, just like he always did. But something about the morning felt different. The air felt lighter, the quiet seemed more welcoming, and the desert looked almost brighter than usual. He went out to do his chores, feeding the horses and checking the fences. But his mind kept drifting back to the woven pouch on his table and the peaceful voice of the young woman when she thanked him. Her words stayed with him. "You showed kindness. You owe me nothing." Those words repeated in his mind as he rode along the fence line. He had done what he believed was right, without expecting anything in return, and in doing so, he had stepped into a piece of history, one that had taught him something important about trust, tradition, and understanding. As the day went on, Jacob found himself thinking more deeply. He had always lived close to the Apache land, but he never knew much about the traditions or beliefs of the people who lived there long before ranches and fences were built. Now he felt a desire to learn, not because he owed it to anyone, but because he genuinely wanted to understand and honor the culture that had opened its doors to him, even briefly. A few days passed, and Jacob could hardly stop himself from thinking about visiting the young woman's family, just as he had been invited to do. He wondered if they lived far into the hills, or closer than he thought. He wondered if she had told them her side of the story, or how she had felt throughout the experience. He also wondered how they would react if he visited. Would they welcome him warmly? Would they be surprised? Would the young woman be there, waiting quietly with the same calm expression? On the fourth morning after their meeting, Jacob saddled his horse. He didn't plan to stay long or ask anything personal. He simply wanted to thank them again, to show that he valued their openness, and to begin learning what he had promised. He rode toward the hills where the riders had disappeared. The landscape changed slowly as he traveled, small rocks scattered across the ground, taller grasses swaying gently in the wind, and the soft rise and fall of land that held quiet stories. He followed the direction he remembered, trusting his instincts and the memory of the path the riders had taken. After an hour or so, he spotted smoke rising from a distant area, thin and graceful against the sky. As he approached, he saw small homes built with care, and surrounded by open space. People walked calmly. Children played near the edges of the area, and older residents sat outside, weaving baskets or preparing food. Jacob slowed his horse as he approached the center of the small settlement. A few people noticed him and offered polite nods. Jacob respectfully removed his hat and nodded back. Soon, the elder he had met before stepped out of a nearby home, recognizing him instantly. A warm smile spread across the old man's face. "You came," the elder said with gentle satisfaction. "I said I wanted to learn," Jacob replied with a shy smile. The elder motioned for him to dismount. "You are welcome here." Jacob tied his horse to a post and followed the elder. As they walked, the elder spoke about simple things, how the land changed during different seasons, how the community worked together, and how traditions had adapted over time. Jacob listened closely, absorbing every word, feeling humbled by the trust being given to him. A short while later, the young woman appeared, carrying a small basket with dried fruit. When she saw Jacob, Her eyes softened slightly. Not with surprise, but with quiet recognition. She walked toward them gracefully and offered the basket. "I'm glad you visited," she said gently. "My family will be pleased." Jacob accepted the basket with gratitude. "I meant what I said," he told her. "I want to understand your ways more. It feels important." She nodded. Understanding is always important. They spent the rest of the day sharing stories. Jacob learned about the old rites, not as rules, but as pieces of culture that once guided life. He learned how the youth were taught to respect the land, how families made decisions together, and how every tradition carried meaning that connected them to their ancestors. The more Jacob listened, the more he realized how much he had been missing by living so close, yet knowing so little. And the more the young woman spoke, the more he admired her quiet strength and thoughtful nature. When it was time for Jacob to leave, the elder placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are welcome here, any time," he said. Jacob felt a warm sense of belonging. "Thank you," he said softly. "I'll come again." As he rode back home, the sky turning a soft pink above him, Jacob felt peaceful. Not because he had followed a tradition, but because he had opened a door to understanding one. He hadn't entered into a union, but he had gained something just as valuable: a connection to a culture rich with meaning, a friendship rooted in respect, and a deeper understanding of the land he called home. Life at the ranch continued as it always had, but Jacob was different now. He carried the woven pouch with him wherever he went, keeping it in his pocket or saddlebag, not as a symbol of obligation, but as a reminder of a moment that had touched his heart. Weeks later, as he rode past the same old mesquite tree where he had first found the young woman, he smiled quietly. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had become a turning point in his life, a moment that helped him grow, learn, and see the world with new eyes. Jacob Turner never forgot her calm presence, her gentle voice, or the soft strength in her silence, and though they walked different paths, their crossing had left a lasting mark on his journey, reminding him always that kindness, understanding, and respect were the true guides of the heart.